Hello, welcome to the January 14th, 2025 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could submit questions in advance or by emailing clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you could simply ask questions in the live chat field. We will go through all the questions chronologically as asked. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed as we are going through and we have lots of questions. We will go through all the questions chronologically as asked. And if you want, when asking questions, if you could specify which level of Cubase you're running. So if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version number, so if it's 12, 13, or 14, and the operating system you're running on, that information will be helpful. And we should have an index of all the topics covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends. And if you wanted to search for topics, there's over 36,000 topics that have been covered since we ramped up the live streams during COVID. You can go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that wonderful website. We also want to give special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude, who serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They just kind of do this to make it a better community experience. And we'll give an extra special kudos to Jazz Dude for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord. So the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord is a wonderful resource of information and tutorials and for the Steinberg community that's really relevant. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from just outside of Washington, D.C. area in the United States. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. Just one quick programming note. I will be at the upcoming NAMM show next week, so we won't have live streams next week. We will continue our normal schedule starting the week after, but there will be no live streams next week because I'll be involved with the NAMM show. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we have Libaldo sending greetings from Pachuca, Mexico. Thanks for joining us. We see Tim K from Zeist in the Netherlands, and his cat buddy is waving a paw to my cat Steven, who's probably in my bed asleep, and Mark Raven's dog Stella and other pets. All right, we have Sway TV on. So he has two-legged and and Sway TV is saying hi to all two-legged and four-legged creatures. All right. DMT Records and Visuals is sending a Happy New Year. So he's learning more from Zim. All right. Richard Carpenter just says educational. All right. Ezra asks, hello, Mr. Gregundo. When I press the brackets on the on-screen keyboard, notifies me that the keys are filtered out. They can't be added. It says, thanks for your kindness. Yeah, so when we have the on-screen keyboard, so this would allow us to, if we have a particular instrument track, so say, I'll just load up quick Holly and Sonic. All right, so we have our MIDI keyboard here. And once we go to, so if we trigger this particular sound, sorry about that. All right, so when we trigger this particular sound that we're going to hear this, but when we use kind of the on-screen keyboard, which you could open with Alt or Option plus K, we could trigger these, and we could trigger these notes using kind of the actual on-screen keys. So you can see like QWERTY, etc. So we could see. So once this is open, other key commands that when you try to access will be blocked because those keys are going to be utilized for the particular keyboard, so that you could treat that as a controller. So you would need to just simply turn that off, and then all of your other key commands will be restored for you. All right, just gonna check. Okay. Ezra also asks, how do I add space between tracks and group faders in the MixConsole? Okay. So let's just come over here. All right, just reopen. Close out my VST Connect for now. Sorry. That'll be for a later question. Okay, so we'll come over and let's say we want to add space between the mixer channels and the groups. So let's say we have a number of audio tracks here. So let's say we'll have 6 audio tracks, and let's add group tracks. So we'll come right over here, we'll add group tracks. So we could assign different tracks to different zones in the mixer. So we have a left zone, a middle zone, as well as a right zone. All right, so right now we see that I have my audio tracks here, and I have they're followed immediately by the group channels. So if we go to the visibility tab and then click on zones, if I take my 2 group channels, I could anchor those over to the right. And if I added more audio tracks, I could now kind of set this boundary between them so that we could have the right zone. So I could have all of these tracks in my groups or my output. So if I come here and I want my master fader to always be on the right hand side, I could slide this. And if I wanted to see input channels or one channel that's always fixed, let's say I go to my input channels, I could fix that to the left zone. I could have all my tracks here, and then the right zone set up here. So once again, go to select the visibility, and then you want to click on zones, and then we could set either it will default to all being in the center zone. We could put tracks off in inputs in the left, groups, effects, outputs. We can anchor those to the right zone for you. All right, wonderful to see Stefan checking in from Sweden, as well as I think it's Claes Olsen. Let me know if I'm saying that incorrectly. Also from Sweden. All right, we have Uno Momento checking in from Finland. All right, we see Jan from Cubase Index, also from Sweden. Tireman Guitar saying hello to everyone. All right, we see Flyv Vince is from Winnipeg. He's getting a brain scan. He's getting an EEG, and he'll be there for a week. We hope that everything goes well for you, Vince. And we're happy that you're able to watch your Club Cubase on your iPhone. So we'll send positive vibes your way. Hope that everything goes well. All right, so we see Roland stuff, just saying hello to everyone in Cubase land. All right, we have Jamin with Canon saying hello to everyone from Texas. All right, So we see from Satterfire says, I have a Novation Remote SL64 that has auto map. I know that this is no longer supported. When I try to open it in Cubase 13 Pro, it says that installing it will damage my computer. So I'm not sure if that's a Steinberg message or maybe it's a different operating system. I don't think, I mean, it may not work well, but I wouldn't anticipate it. But I haven't followed the auto map since it was kind of discontinued a while ago. But I don't think that it may, do damage to your computer. So, but I don't know, but I could look into it if you want to send me an email. All right, wonderful to see Michael Graybill checking in from Dallas. All right, and we have Brett Rader, formerly of Los Angeles, now in Pennsylvania. So, yeah, let us know what part of Pennsylvania you're in. Just curious, I have a lot of family in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre area, and Reading as well. All right, Achilles just says, hello, Cubase 14 Pro. Is it possible to move an event in samples and commit to that? Certainly, everything that we do in Cubase for the resolution of the audio is going to be based on samples. So it's a sample level. So if we want, we could change our... So when we change our master time format, that could allow us to change the grid for moving or nudging events. So we'll get this project open here quickly. All right. So if we want to place our master timeline, if we right click in our top timeline, we could choose for this to be samples. And then when we go to nudge, we could just say we want to nudge by one sample. So our nudging commands will be so when I hold down Control or Command and then hit the right arrow, we can see this value here. So our start, we're at, sample 2,751,845. And if I hold down my nudge, so that's Command or Control plus the right arrow key, that we could move these events at the sample level. Now, if you don't want to have to switch between different time formats, so if we're in bars and beats, I can move it by bar, beat. I could use a quantized value or adapt to zoom. If I am in seconds, our time of reference for nudging and snapping could be 1 millisecond, 10, 100, or 1,000 milliseconds. But if I wanted to have different, like an independent nudge resolution from my primary, so let's say I always want to be in bars and beats, but I want to nudge by a sample, what we could do is right click and we're going to activate the nudge palette. So once we go into our nudge, we can see right now it's set to link to grid, but I could choose, let's say, samples, and then I want to now set this to, let's say, 10 samples. And now when I do nudging commands, we can move this by 10 samples at a time without having to switch the primary time display to a different value. So once you right click here and activate the nudge, here we could have this linked to the grid, or we could choose to link it to other time formats. So this would link it to the primary time format, or if you wanted to nudge in values independent of the time format of the primary time. So if I'm in bars and beats, I want to nudge in samples, I could just choose samples there and nudge by, 10 samples, 1 sample, etc. See, Tireman Guitar says he's always wanted to go to NAMM. So yeah, it's kind of fun. I usually like the last 20 years, I haven't had a chance to actually walk around and see all the cool stuff at the NAMM show. I'm just always kind of, I always joke, I'm kind of chained to the booth and people will come by, say hi. So, but it's always wonderful to see people such as Tim Weinheimer. We got to hang with him at the last NAMM show. And Tim is just mentioning, so hello all. So sad, so many people affected by the Los Angeles fires. Yeah, it's pretty devastating to watch. I've had multiple friends lose their amazing studios and instruments. It's really heart-wrenching. Hopefully it stops soon. I know the winds are picking up again today. All right, Adam asks, hi all, since upgrading to 14 Artist on Mac, a couple of folders or WAV files don't load in the MediaBay or browser. I rescan and that appeared in MediaBay, but not in the browser. They are 32-bit. Okay. All right, so a couple folders and WAV files don't load in MediaBay or in the browser. I rescan and they appear in the MediaBay, but not in the browser. So, you know, I don't think that it being 32-bit would make a difference. Let me just come here. We'll do a test. I will, let's set our project record format. Here, I'll set this to 32-bit. Okay, and let's and I'll just set a quick change the record folder here. All right, I'll put this on the desktop so we can find it. Okay. All right, so we'll just generate some audio files here. All right, now let's look in MediaBay. All right, let's look at our desktop. We'll open our desktop folder here. So there's all the files that we just recorded. So, but the files don't load in MediaBay. So it says that you rescanned, but it seems like you know, when we look at this, you know, the actual files, 32-bit float, 48K, they all showed up as expected. All right, so a couple folders of WAV files don't load into MediaBay. So make sure, one, that, you know, the folder here, I assume, is checked. So if I come over here and click onto that, then, you know, we could rescan maybe in the folder, but if the folder itself isn't checked, so make sure that that is checked. But everything kind of seems to work as expected on my end. Let me know, Adam, if I did anything differently than you did. All right, always great to see Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas. We have Martin checking in from Germany. Robert B. from, I guess it's Euxton in the UK. RJ Regin says nice from India. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the live stream. All right, so we see Roland stuff. Says, sorry, I can't be watching live, Greg, but I'm helping backstage at a local pantomime dress rehearsal. If you have time, I have emailed a question about Very Audio, and we'll catch up later. So I'll see if I could get it towards the end of the live stream. We're going through all the mailed in questions. I don't think I got it before the live stream, but I'll take a quick look at it. And good luck with your rehearsal. All right, Tireman Guitars says, I have one question today. Greg, do you know why when I try Tape to Vibes and Colors Free VSTI does not show in the library folder? It says I need a license even though it's free. So even though they are free, you still have to activate the license. So, make sure that you download it. If you do like the download assistant, let's see if I have, when you go to the website, I'll just pop over here quickly. Let's say, I'll just go to Steinberg.net and everyone can see my cat gift coming. All right. So let's say when we come here and let's say we will go, let's just take a, let's say colors vibe. All right. So even though they're free instruments, the licenses still have to be activated. All right, let me just, all right, so we'll go to our free instruments. All right, so when I come here and you'll go to the download, it will log it into your account. So, go from the website, it will log this into your particular My Steinberg account, and then it's going to link, and you want to make sure we just come over here. Then this is going to make the link with your account. We could now go to the Steinberg download assistant. All right. So now when I come over to the Steinberg download assistant, I think we should see, I will restart it here just so we have access to it. So then you're going to download it and activate it. So even though it's free, the license still has to be activated. So here's my guitar harmonics. I will install. So start from the website, and then it'll show up. So since I logged in with my Steinberg credentials, it will now automatically show up here. I'll install it. All right. Now we will come over, add an instance of Halley and Sonic. Let's take a look. Just all right. And let me just see if I may have to restart my Cubase, but I will go to my activation manager. And it's always probably a good idea not to do this. All right, so C not activated. So I see that my guitar harmonics is not activated. I'm going to activate. And it's going to do that. Then it will show up as an available instrument. So even though it's free, you still have to activate the license. All right, so we see that my guitar harmonics is activated. Let's come over here. We could. I may have to restart Cubase, but that's the process that you would utilize. Let's see if I just go to different instrument now. Let's say we jump to Hallian. I may have to restart the program, but that's what you would do. So even though it is free, the license will have to be activated. All right. All right, so you see hello from Quebec from OB Licks Original Music. Satterfire just says using MacBook Pro 2023. I think that was with the previous question. Let me just scroll back. Yeah, so I'm not sure if there's anything with, I have an old Novation controller, but I've never really had to, I never really utilized the auto map functionality of it. But if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to kind of take a look and see if there, or maybe if someone else has experience with it, could share to see if it's dangerous to enable auto map on your Novation controller. All right, Martin asks, Greg, do you know if there will be another premium audio interface from Steinberg this year or next as a successor to the AXR4 for PC and Mac? I haven't heard of anything on the roadmap plan-wise. Sometimes, those interfaces are actually made by Yamaha and they're kind of Steinberg branded. We do a lot of interactions, obviously, for the software and hardware integrations. So, but I haven't heard of any high-end audio interfaces in the works. I will be seeing a lot of people from Yamaha and Steinberg next week when I'm at the NAMM show, so I may be able to get some information there. But nothing has been announced, or I think that will be announced imminently. Okay, so we have Miroslav Farkas saying hello. We have Mayor David, just says 9th, okay, IPK, okay, all right, Milton Sinani Rojas asks, hi, new on Cubase, how can I see the tempo of my project? So you'll see it in the bottom corner here. So as soon as we look on the transport bar, so we see like we have the rewind, fast forward, and here we could see the tempo of the project right there. So look on the transport bar, and you'll see kind of where we can activate tempo, and we could just see what the tempo value is directly there. All right, so we just have a question. Hi, Greg, I'm AJ from London. I have a problem, which is when I plug in my 512 gigabyte SSD external hard drive, the MediaBay will not pick up the files from the external hard drive. Um, so when you're doing that, one is, make sure it's being recognized by the computer operating system. But you should be able to, if you go to your media menu to MediaBay, go to this computer, you'll see all of your hard disks, and just make sure that your hard drive is showing up here and that the hard drive has a check. So if it's not checked, then Cubase will ignore that particular hard drive. So make sure that when you connect it, that you see it listed here. So make sure that the operating system is seeing it first. Like, so if you go to your Finder or your Windows Explorer, make sure that the computer is seeing it, and then just when you go to you should see the hard drives listed here when you go to this computer, and then just simply make sure that that drive is connected and that it is checked on that particular drive. All right, CB4 asks, can you show how to organize VST plugins? Yeah, so if we go to your studio menu, you'll see a VST plugin manager. So here we could see all of our plugins, and they're kind of broken down by effects or instruments. So let's say I want to, if we go over to the right-hand side of this particular window, we could now add what we call a plugin collection. I could duplicate a plugin collection, or we could say, okay, I want to make an empty plugin collection. So we'll call this January 14th, 2025. Okay, so let's say my instrument, I'm always going to use, let's say I want to start off with Groove Agent SE, and then the one I use next, I want to be, let's say, Hallian Sonic. So we'll come over here, and now let's say I want to have like my instruments broken down into like a folder. So we could right click here and we could choose to create a folder, and we'll call this synths. All right, now within, and I can move this down if I wanted to. So let's say, okay, I want to have this include Retrolog, and I could drag these into my synths folder. So we say, okay, let's get Retrolog, drag it in. I want Pad Shop, and let's say Backbone. All right, and now I want a folder called Piano. So we could come over here, let's create a folder, Piano. And at this point, we could say, okay, let's take the Grand 3, and I could just drag and drop that, not into my synths, but into my piano folder, and I want my piano folder to be down. So you could come over here. One thing you could do is just, if you click on the little drop down menu here, you're going to have the option to organize. We could choose to organize by, manufacturer, or organize by different, by different categories if you want. But now when you come over here, you could just make your own collections and organize your plugins exactly how you want. And if we go to your VST effects, this would be completely independent. So you can see that when we go here, here's different plugin collections we made over the live streams. So we could see exactly all the plugins that are in your system and organize them however you want. So just jump back here to my VST instruments, and we will go to my default. And when you go to default, that will kind of show all of the plugins, and you could duplicate that. So if you want to start off, we could say we're going to right click here. We could copy the current collection and modify it, or add all plugins. All right, so we have Yazian Trebi. Is it possible to renew my trial license on the Activation Manager for Mac and Windows on the same or other Steinberg account? So how can I do it? So I know we covered this before several times, but there's one trial version that you could have activated, and you can't renew a trial version. So after your trial version is over, the way to renew it is probably just to purchase the program. All right, always so fantastic to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. All right. All right, and we see that Uno Memento is granted Michael Teams and Olvi Bear, which is made in the same city as Genelec speakers. All right, so we see Stephen McCormack says, can Cubase clean up .back files from my hard drive, or should I delete them with File Explorer? So you could delete them with the File Explorer. You can't specify in Cubase, so there isn't a function in Cubase to delete that. That would be kind of more of a File Explorer or Mac Finder issue. But if you didn't want to have so many backup files created, if you go to your preferences or settings, and I think it's under general, you'll see the auto saves. You could say the maximum number of auto save files, defaults to 10. You can make that fewer. So if you wanted to be 2 or 3, whatever you wanted to, so it wouldn't have as many .back files, which are the backups. All right. And Michael Teams has countered his Olvi beer from Uno Memento with a gallon of Texas strawberry ice cream. So it could be freezing outside and ice cream is still good. All right, so we see CB4 just says, amazing, thank you so much. All right, see Michael Teams sending greetings to John Costigan and granting him 1 gallon of butter pecan ice cream. All right, Michael Teams wants everyone to smash the like button. Tiago, it's great to see you from Newcastle in the UK. Thanks for joining us. All right, you see Michael Teams has a short day today, has to go to the doctor's office just for some blood work. So, all right. All right, I'm going to jump to, I know we had a series of questions. All right, so we have Mongs Motihabi checking in from South Africa for the first time. So welcome, and we hope to see you on many more live streams in the future. All right, CB4 says, Greg, you're a godsend. You've helped me more than you know with these live streams. Well, thank you for the kind words. Glad to be able to help people anytime. It's rewarding and satisfying to me. All right. Okay, so we had a question on the last live stream of why is there a monitoring latency in VST Connect session? All right, so this is always tricky to kind of get set up. So let's take a look. I have to run 3 audio interfaces at once on one single computer, so this is always a little dicey, but so let's go ahead and take a look at setting up a VST Connect session. All right, so what we're going to do is, let's open up a VST Connect session here. All right, and what I have is just a session set up where we're going to have the VST Connect, and I'm going to run that off. I'm going to try to do this all on one computer. Sorry, this is a little tricky. All right. And I'm going to open up the VST Connect Performer software. All right, so VST Connect, if you're not familiar with it, allows you to do remote recording. Okay, so I'm going to record my bass. So I'm going to do this through VST Connect Pro so I could do it on the same network. So what I want to do is we'll come over, and we could often just start with going to VST Connect Pro and just say create VST Connect. I'm going to open up my VST Connect editor here, and we are going to come over here. I'm going to go online, and you could look for people, your friends, if you want to record. But I'm going to go to my Performer software here. All right, and we want to make sure that we have the audio interface selected. So here I'm going to use my UR22C. Okay, and I'm going to change the buffer down, let's say 256. And I'm going to we're going to use the UR22C. And for my mic, I want to go into input 2. So when we go to record someone, let me just grab my cable here and grab a bass. Just got a new bass last week, so we'll use that. Okay. And I want to tell the VST Connect that we're going to connect with all right, so I'm going to now come over and so this is my performer end, and when I play, you may hear like as I move my strings in the microphone, you hear that there's no latency on the performer side. Now when I switch to monitor playback to the connection is now when I play back, you'll hear kind of a latency on that. So I'll turn off my talk back here. So when I'm doing my, so what's happening is that the signal is when we play the project, it's going to be sent over to the performer side, which is this. The performer is going to hear it. And when I play it here, just so you know which is which, let's say I play this, I have like a Groove Agent track playing. So we'll play the project. The studio side will have the click track. And when I go to the performer side, there's no click track in the performer side. Okay, so I have two different audio interfaces for this. They're both going into the mixer at the same time. So now by the time the audio gets sent from the studio to the performer and the performer back, that's going to be a delay. So if I were to listen to both of these simultaneously, that's the delay versus what I'm just hearing as the performer. All right, so when it gets sent out, it's all delay compensated on to the performer. The performer then records, and it's delay compensated back to the studio. So when we come over here, I just want to arm the track for record, and I have this set to go into my VST Connect. I'm going to put it into my right channel. And now as I hit record in Cubase, I'm listening to this on and let me just make sure I have the So this is what it sounds like on to the person tracking. All right, so now when I want to listen to it on the playback system, I will mute the performer side and we hit play. So we can see that that recording is in time. And if I play both of these back, again, we're going to hear a delay between real time what's happening. So this is what's going on for the person tracking. So they're hearing that, and we want to, if we don't hear it back to the musician, we'll open up the channel. Let's get to the Q sends, and I just want to turn this on. So now we could hear those different so the timing is the same. Now if I wanted to listen to only the performer side, I could listen to this, but when I go to play long, what I'm hearing during the tracking process is going to be out of time. So when I do this, because I'm monitoring what I'm playing from the recording part and not the performer part. So when I come over here, and so I hear this, and so but we can still hear it in time from the recording person, so when you're doing this live, like you can't necessarily monitor it while it is while it's going, while the performer. So, if I was recording someone else, it would sound fine on the recording person's end, and it would sound fine on the tracking on the studio. So it's going to sound fine for the performer and for the studio. Each side is going to be delay compensated. And we got another question since we have this up. All right, so, once we have this, you don't enable the monitor, you just turn this on, and then that would do all the delay compensation for both systems. Now, the second question is, I have a Mac version 12 Pro with VST Connect provided. When trying in vain to connect to my friend, Windows version 13 Pro, for some reason I cannot hear him at all on my side on the system, but his video feed is frozen. He can hear my track, but I get no audio from his system. Also, the whole thing seems to time out after about 10 minutes. If you have any ideas, it'd be greatly appreciated. So, it doesn't matter which version of Cubase you're running. The person that's being recorded, they have to have the VST Connect on. Now, when you do this, make sure that, and you could do this from the studio side. So if someone isn't like very tech savvy, they could come over here to the VST Connect Pro and make sure that you have the correct audio interface settings here. So make sure that they have the correct audio interface settings for like the input on like, let's say, the microphone. So make sure that this is set to the right device, and that should be all you would need to do. And it says we also have a hard time to connect his MIDI keys again. So, and it said that you were using there's a VST Connect Pro and a VST Connect SE. The VST Connect SE doesn't allow to do MIDI recording, so it's only going to allow you to do audio recording. The VST Connect Pro, you could do MIDI recording as well. All right, so let me just mute my mic and I'll put my bass down. Hang on just 1 second, and I'll disconnect the other audio interface. All right, so let me just exit out of my VST Connect here. It's tricky to kind of get that set up for showing on a live stream. All right. All right, let's jump back to our live questions. Okay. Okay, so we have Exley Music Lab checking in from Edinburgh. All right. All right, so we have from MM, just says Cubase 14 and Cubasis at the same time on the same project. So it's not intended to, work simultaneously between the two programs, but what it is intended to, just make sure I have, okay. So Cubasis, so you could start, like Cubasis isn't intended to synchronize with Cubase, but you could start your Cubasis project, and then when you're ready to take it into Cubase, you could just import the Cubasis project. But it's not really intended to be running simultaneously on this within the same track. All right. All right, Jeffrey Spence asks, hello, Greg. I tried to explode my tracks in Nuendo Pro 13. After completing a task, none of the tracks followed. This is what I've done. Here are my chords, C, A minor, F, and G. I now take, just see if there's further. I try to expose the chords in the track in Nuendo 13. The tracks explode, but no data comes in tracks like they are empty tracks. All right, so let's come up and this is going to behave a little differently in Nuendo 13. So I'll open up in Nuendo 13. So usually the explode function is going to be handled from within the score editor. Okay, so come to new window 13. Let's go to, I guess it's a chord track. So the chords, C, A minor, F, G. Okay. Tried and true arrangement, chord progression. Okay, so I want to, let's add an instrument track here. And we see that the guitar harmonics that we added is now showing up here. So that's the free instrument we just installed. All right, so we'll come over here. I'll just add this, and I want to drag these notes to the chord track. All right, I'm going to make this, we'll make this all one happy event. All right, so now let's say I'm in the score editor. And I'll just take all these up an octave. Okay, so let's say we have our chords. So now that we are in the score editor, we will come over here and go to our functions, and then we'll see explode, and I want to add 3 new tracks. We'll hit OK, and we'll look at it, and now each of these will, see if I did it right. All right, I'll just drag these down one more time. So, or just go to chord track and so then we could see that these have been kind of split to the individual parts, just like that. So each one will now be split. So make sure that you have that you go into the score editor and that you do the explode from within the scored editor under scores to functions. And then once you explode, you can choose the number of new tracks. And then each of those would automatically be split for you. And the behavior is a little different in Cubase 14. So, but since you have Nuendo, that's why I want to show you there. Okay, John, let's see. Okay. All right, you see Mongs, who usually watches the live streams afterwards. All right. Okay, so we see AJ kind of asking the same question again. All right, Zach Pope asks, hey Greg, Cubase 14 Pro trial crashes when I try to quit the application. My M1 Mac Studio happens once every 3 to 4 times. Can't seem to figure out why. Any possible solution? So make sure, one, that you're not running any third-party plugins. Often when something is crashing on exit, it's a third-party plugin that's not releasing its memory, and it's kind of holding on to memory. Some people may choose to eliminate that by turning on, trying to close the project before closing. So that's a way to kind of terminate the memory, but it's often a third-party plugin. It's not releasing its memory. All right. We see Dwight Cunningham checking in from the Bahamas. Says, and he asks, Greg, can you explain MIDI loops in Cubase 14? Okay, so when we deal with MIDI loops, MIDI loops are kind of like a MIDI file, but it will actually contain MIDI loops to work with VST instruments. So if we wanted to come over here to our MediaBay loops and samples, we can see some in our sequel content. So let's say I was looking for acoustic piano, and we could audition these particular loops. So let's say I want that particular MIDI loop in. Now this MIDI loop, unlike a MIDI file just contains kind of the actual MIDI notes. Okay, so when we go to edit a particular MIDI file, we don't necessarily see but it doesn't, the MIDI file itself, it could have a program change that could send to play back a particular sound, a program, but that program change may use different sounds for different instruments. But this actually recalls the instrument that you're using, and it will recall the instrument. So it's the VSTI, the VST instrument, and the sound of that VST instrument is automatically recorded with that. So if I go to add an instrument track, and let's say, okay, we'll just go to Hallian Sonic 7, we'll go to electric bass, okay. So let's say I was playing here, and I'll open up. So let's say we record. All right, so now if I wanted to save this particular part and save that as a MIDI loop, when I come over, we'll say, okay, let's go to export. So if I export as a MIDI file, it wouldn't necessarily load up the Hallian, it wouldn't load up the electric bass instrument with its particular sound. So MIDI would just contain the actual notes. But if I now export this as a MIDI loop, we'll say export. And then, so as soon as we do, I think we just need to select a single event. So we'll say 1, 14, 25, bass. So now when I go to open up that particular MIDI loop, I think if we go to loops and samples that we could now just come over, say we're looking for MIDI loops. That we could just simply load that up. When we load that MIDI loop up, that particular MIDI loop is automatically, and let me just make sure it's not. So again, we'll just say, okay, we'll have our MIDI loops. Here's my, I'm going to delete this particular instrument. So we will remove this track, and now when I drag this MIDI loop in, it will again load up that particular instrument with the right sound, so that you know that a MIDI loop is going to be playing back through the same particular instrument. It's not considered, it's not intended for like, you know, 14 tracks at once. That's when a MIDI file would be more applicable. But for a single part that you want to use for like looping a MIDI where you want to drag something in, it's going to play the right sound, it's going to load the correct instrument. That's what MIDI loops allow you to do that you don't see with other standard MIDI files. All right. Thanks for joining us today, Dwight. Okay, sorry, my chat field jumped on me. All right, so we see Tiago says, I have a long dialogue with several pauses. In each phrase, we're putting a translation voice in the pause. Now I have the other audio clip translated voice also with pauses. Is there a project logical editor, one, to remove silences and put each segment event from the translated audio file clip right after the original clip and so forth? Sometimes the original audio event needs to have a slight more or less time than the original according to the translation phrase length. All right, so long dialogue with several pauses in each phrase. We're putting a translation voice in pauses. Now I have other audio clips with translated voice also with pauses. All right, so if you wanted to remove silence, let me just see if I have. Just look for, I think I have a dialogue. All right, so if we had what I would do and what I see a lot of people doing when working on localizing material. So let's say if we have your material like this, what I know, you know, so I'm not sure if this would work for your workflow, Tiago. I'm just going to reread just real quick. So I don't think that there is a project logical editor to remove silences, which you could kind of do, and let's say put each segmented event from the translated audio clip right after the original clip. So let's say if, and I'll just add some more space here between these. All right, so let me see if I do a bounce selection. If so, all right. Okay, so we have our audio. Now, let's say if we come over, so let's say we have our pause. So what I see a lot of people doing when doing translation work is to have a track version, and then they have one track version for, and they may duplicate this. So let's say we duplicate this particular track. Okay, and then in their duplicated track, they may have like a Brazilian, a Spanish, and English, a different language, so that you could see all of these particular events. So I think what you want to do is if you wanted to split this audio, and we will come over here. Let's go to your audio to advanced. And we could do a detect silence. Okay. I have Grandmaster Flash calling. Let me just tell him I'll come back after the live stream. Everyone can say hi to Grandmaster Flash. Okay, so now what we want to do is to come over here. We're going to strip to silence. I'm going to analyze the silent parts, and we'll process. And now we have taken the silent parts, and we could automatically, and we could set the threshold accordingly. So let's say we're on this track, and we've now gotten rid of all of the silent parts. So we could do that. And okay, and if you want to put it right after the clip, I think that if we switch this to, there's, I think, a trick. If we put this all into shuffle mode, and we want all these clips. So now that I put it in shuffle mode, what we could do now is, all right, so if I want to, all these clips to go like back to back without any gaps between them, I could just activate, I'll shift, double click all the events on this particular track, put my grid mode to shuffle, and this isn't necessarily in a like a macro, and now I could move, and then I just kind of move them together, and then the gaps between all the events are erased. So if we undo that versus redo, that's how we could eliminate all of the gaps. So if I wanted to take these particular files here, and once I'm in, change my grid to shuffle, I can now just come right over and that way they could all be, and if I want like this first one to stay intact, I could select these particular events, move them over, and I don't want to go before, I just want to go right next to it, and then all the gaps between the events will be eliminated. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Tiago. All right, so I see from Phil Horton, is there something I need to do in Cubase? It sounds like maybe a second part of a question. Let me scroll back and make sure I didn't miss it. All right, maybe Phil, if you could ask, maybe I missed the first part of the question. If you want to re-ask the first part of the question, I'd be happy to try to help you. I guess Michael Teams missed it too. All right, and we see Phil Horton just says, see the info on the left of the opening screen. So is it the hub? So if it's this, usually it's just going to make a connection with your web browser. So make sure that you have, this is kind of dynamic and is coming from the web browser. But let me know if this is what you're looking to do, Phil, if you're looking to see that. And make sure that you have an active internet connection. Okay, we have a question from 808 King, who asks, I did some recent automation on an instrument track, and now it seems like every track has the green read automation light on now. Is there something I could do in preferences to stop that? All right, so if we have just a number of instrument tracks, so when if all of the tracks were automated, so let's say we'll go over to this project here. All right. So I don't have any read or write on, but I will automate some parameters here. So I'm going to automate these parameters in Groove Agent. So say I just come here. All right, so now when I come over here, we'll see that the Groove Agent is turned on. So, that's the only one that I engaged automation on. Now, if you wanted to globally bypass playback of, if we have a number of tracks here that are kind of read enabled for automation, if you go up to the top, you could turn those off and on just by clicking on the global read write automation, enable or disable icon. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, and we see from Phil Horton, says, no, when you first boot, it gives you the option to choose what type of project. On the right and the left is news, etc. It says says it's not connected to the internet when I am. So, check sometimes, if it, let us know if it's something new. Sometimes it could be like your default browser could be causing that, but you should be able to see it as long as you are connected to the internet. All right, FlyV asks, is there a way to easily keep on beat while using loops and samples? Okay, so I'm not sure if, so let's say if I come over here, we'll just let's do a quick new project here. Right, so when you go to auditions, I'm not sure if you're auditioning, Vince, or not. So, so when I go to MediaBay, so let's say if I put this into like a 2-bar loop, all right, and just all right, so as we're here, let's say if I was auditioning different loops, so we'll come over here to drum loops. All right, and like as we select loops, one of the things that you could do, there's a couple of different options. One is wait for project. So if I go to select a loop, it's gonna wait for beat 1 to start. So if I start in the middle, as soon as it gets to the next beat 1, this will automatically. So I'm gonna switch here on beat 2. And you notice that it won't start previewing that loop until beat 1 comes around. So let's say I change it now. So it'll wait for beat 1 to start the loop so that you could audition it in sync. And that's just by enabling wait for project. And then if you have this musical mode turned on, then where you see this little musical note here, that will automatically adapt it to preview in the project tempo for you. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Vince. All right, and we see Phil just about his hub says that his is saying not connected. So I don't think there's anything in Cubase to turn on to if you see the hub. So I think that there are preferences. I'm not sure if it's in the latest version where you could deactivate the hub. But I'm just seeing if it's, I think there used to be a preference for where it wouldn't show up, but there's no setting in Cubase to turn on the internet. It's usually Cubase isn't detecting an internet connection, so. Yeah, let me just look at that preference one more time. You see Jazz Dude posted a picture. Yeah, show news in hub, so make sure that that is turned on. Some people don't like it. All right, wonderful to see Benny checking in from Sweden. All right, Jammin' and Cannon has given a gallon of Bluebell gooey butter cake ice cream to Michael Teams. We always forget to reciprocate to Michael Teams. So it's very nice of you to do. All right, War Walker asks, my band did a session using Cubase IC Pro to operate my computer remotely. After the session, I realized not all files were included in the project. How do I back up the project pool? So there's a couple ways to do it. One is if you want all the files to be consolidated to the project, like audio folder, if you go to Media, you could choose Prepare Archive, and that way if files are located in different folders other than the main project audio, it will automatically just come right over here, and that will place it into the main project record folder. So try going to Media and select Prepare Archive. And that will consolidate to a single location. Okay, and we see also more comments from Warwalker. It says, to clarify, I would like to back up the project pool to an external drive before attempting a rebuild of the project from the files in the project pool. So, if you want to back up the project, we could save the pool. I'll come over here. Let me just... I'll just kind of punch in and out. We'll get some audio files. Okay, so if we come over here, we could, if you wanted to back up the project to a different location, is just to come right over here. And you could also, another method to do is just to choose backup project. And when you do backup project, it's going to, you want to put this into a new folder. And as we do that, we define the new folder. We'll give it a name. We could choose to minimize audio files, make direct offline processing permanent. So, and now all of the audio files in the project are going to be backed up utilizing the backup project. So that's another method for doing that. All right, so we see Bratman Studio on from California. Hope you're doing well with weather. Let me just... it says, looking forward to NAMM. Hope the fires don't have too much an effect on the show. Winds are picking up. The music communities are coming together for musicians and studios affected. So, yeah, hopefully it won't affect NAMM. I know that there are some... Like Yamaha usually puts on a big outdoor concert, and it's kind of cool that it's all Yamaha instruments going into Yamaha mixers, into Yamaha speakers being recorded in Steinberg software, etc. It's a big, if you've been to NAMM, it's a huge production going on outside. So that may, depending on the air quality, that might be turned off, that may be shut off. So, but hopefully the show will go on. Yeah, so Michael Team says he heard that Bob Clearmountain lost his studio. So, yeah, I know longtime Cubase users Star Parodi and Jeff Fair, they lost their studio and their piano as well. It's very devastating to see. Okay, Michael Teams wants everyone to hit the like button and keep spinning the great tutorials live. All right, so we see, hi G, what's the difference between import track archive and tracks from project? So a track archive doesn't have, it's very similar, and when you import it, it looks almost the same. But you could export a track, archive, or you'd call it export selected tracks. But it doesn't have to be in a defined project, whereas exporting or importing tracks from project has to be a project. So if you were here and you said, okay, I want to like build up a quick, almost like a mini template, if you will. So I want to come over here. Let's add, let's say 8 audio tracks. All right, so we'll come here. I want this to be kick, snare, hat, hi, Tom. All right, so I haven't saved this as a project, and let's say, okay, I have all sorts of different plugins on it, whatever, and this is my studio kit. I could come right over here and we could say you want to go to your file menu and we could export selected tracks. Okay, so we'll just come here, we'll say okay, we'll give it a name. I'll save this to desktop. We'll say 1:14:25. Okay, so now, so I don't have to have this as a project. So a lot of people will build up almost like little mini templates, and then you're doing a project. Let's say I'll remove the selected tracks. I never save that as its own separate entity as a project. Now I could come over here and import tracks from a project, or I'm sorry, we'll choose to import a track archive. Sorry for confusing. Now when we do this, we could say, okay, here's my, and I'm going to select all. We could put these onto new tracks, and then all the data is there, but I didn't have to save it as a project file. Now when if I save this as a project, all right, so we'll call this Warwalker 2. Now when I go to import tracks from a project, here's our project. We're going to see that this is, in essence, kind of the same things. So, but we don't have to, exporting the selected tracks as a track archive. That doesn't have to be saved independently as its own project. So a lot of people may build up a project and then save like think of it as a mini template and say, okay, this is my brass, this is my studio drum kit, this is my this, and then they'll just import that track archive and build up their projects from there. So, but once you're importing it, there's really no discernible difference. It's just on the process of where you're creating it from. All right, Braxel asks, any way to save a profile for all your external effects for hardware or other than favorites? I'll do a new session, and if I change the external effects, it will not carry over to previous sessions. So yeah, there isn't a way to do that because the input-output routings, if they're kind of dynamically switched, so there isn't a way. I'll kind of reiterate this. I know a lot of people want this for this functionality in Cubase 14. They lifted the restriction. It used to be that you couldn't reuse multiple, like the same inputs and outputs for multiple devices, and now you can. So there was some changes in 14 if you don't have that. All right, and Warwalker is just saying, everyone, Happy New Year from Paris, Ontario. Giving thanks to Jazz Dude for his efforts. All right, Ed Rugman just says, hi Greg, there used to be a bug either with instrument tracks or MIDI tracks and with Vienna Ensemble Pro that disabling tracks in Cubase and re-enabling would lose the routing sometimes. Was this recently fixed? So I haven't tried it. I don't have a Vienna Pro license, but let's say if we have, let's see if we could. All right, so let me just try a instrument track. All right, and let's try, and let's say I want this to go out. Let me activate output within the instrument. All right, and let's say I will add a MIDI track, and we'll put this onto channel 3. And I want to all right, so we have this instrument is going out to output 2. This one is going out to output 3. Let me disable both of those instruments. And I'm going to enable both those instruments, and we'll see if the still looks like it's going out to output 1. So it looks like it's still, when enabling, disabling, I'll make a note of that and pass it along today. Thanks. I'll check on that, Ed. Thanks for bringing it to our attention. All right, so a question from 808 King. Greg, can you show me how to use the new automation to be able to use the line tool and draw up and down for like 4 bars connected to a pluck and pluck sound in a synth and controlling LFO speed? So I'm not sure. So let's say if we want, I'll just grab this volume here. So I'm not sure if you want to come here. Let's say we want to draw in, let's say, like I'll just do 2 measures here. Okay, so let's say I want to select like this range of automation and duplicate it. So I'm just going to reread the question again. How to use the new automation to be able to use the line tool and draw up and down for like 4 bars connected to pluck sound and controlling on a synth, controlling the LFO speed. So I'm not sure if you want to approach it from like more like automation, if this is what you want to do. So, or if you wanted to use the modulators, so, but you could just duplicate that over and over again if you wanted to. So I'm not sure if you want to do it with automation or if you wanted to do it with an LFO. So let's say if we come to, let's say a retro log here. Okay, so let's say we'll come here and activate. Okay, so let's say if we have like chords here in our event. Okay, so let's say we have something along these lines. All right, and if we wanted to now come over here to the modulators, we'll say, okay, let's go to an LFO, and I want it to go up and down, so we could even, if we wanted to go, let's say to a shaper. All right, so now if we do this and I want this to last for one measure. And I want to control, let's say, the volume of this, so let's say you want to do 4 measures. So now we've come over here. And we can set more of the range of it. So if you want to do it with an LFO or do it via automation, either way. So let me know if that's kind of what you're looking to do, 808 King. All right, Tim Cage is saying, hey to Grandmaster Flash. All right. Tim Cage says, sometimes it comes crushing back in all at once to sound incredibly, amazingly cool this Club Cubase community is. All right, we see Michael Teams is heading out for his appointment. Good luck. Wonderful to see Kerwin Young from Atlanta, whose last live stream was in Florida. All right, Metal Mage says I upgraded last week from 9.5 Pro to 14 Pro, and it's awesome. That's great. All right, Nikki Zarin says greetings from Romania. Thank you for all your help. So you're welcome. All right, so we see Tyreman Guitars. How do I stop Cubase from automatically creating an input-output file on startup? So the reason that it does it, like if we do a new project here, all right, so we'll see the input-output. And people had complained before that they couldn't just go to like the output and at this point just draw like a fade out, that they would have to literally go to the MixConsole and automate that, and then this field would show up that they could draw in. So it does open up minimize, but this allows you to quickly, you know, draw in master effects automation without having to go to the master fader and automate something for this to show up. So that in previous versions, people complained about this a lot, so that's why it'll kind of show up. And I guess if you're starting from a template, that you could choose to have that hidden if you want to. But that's kind of the intention, is that as you want to just, you know, do a fade in, fade out of the master fader, that you wouldn't have to necessarily write kind of, you know, unnecessary automation to get the parameter to show up. So that's kind of the intention. But I guess you could, if you're starting from a template, that you could hide that as part of the visibility settings. So, but let me know if I misunderstood the question, Tyreman Guitars. See Braxel just saying Anaheim, where the NAMM show is not close enough to those fires to have an issue, maybe air quality issue. I grew up in Orange County and lived there for 46 years. So I was actually born in Anaheim. Moved when I was 1. All right, wonderful to see Val from Y42 just asking what's up. All right, Sway TV says Guitar Harmonics Essentials installed, but does not show up in activation area. So again, make sure that when you're doing the install that you actually go, you know, you will need to come over. So let's say we go to your VST instruments, go to all instruments, free, and then you need to download from here. And then once we do this, it'll link it to your My Steinberg account. So you'll go to the download assistant. So this is linked it when we see this little kind of check. And then you'll go, when you go to your downloads page, it will now show up here. Install it from the activation manager. So it's going to go into the download access code, and then you install from there, and that will activate it and make it show up in the activation manager for you. All right, so Val has been recommending the stream on Reddit a lot lately. Hope there are a few guys here from there. So thank you for the support. We appreciate it, Val. Okay, Val's question is, on the channel, the pre is enabled by default. When I bypass it, does it change anything with no LC or HC? So if you don't do any particular, so it may be, so if we add an audio track, you know, and if we go to our inspector, we'll see the pre area here. So if it is, you know, visible, that means it's, you know, unless you actually see that this is turned on or gain or phase is turned on, it's not doing anything. So it may be visible, but it's not doing any processing until you physically enable it by hitting the buttons, adjusting the gain or turning flipping the polarity there. All right, so Tigerman Guitars is asking if anyone has an SSL UF1 with Cubase. So I think it's a great feeling controller. So a lot of people like it. It can be a little expensive. It still utilizes the Mackie control protocol underneath everything. So. All right, Permanent Green says, hello everyone. Greg, is there a way to externally sequence multiple VST plugins like Retrolog, PatchOp, etc. with a hardware sequencer, basically using Cubase as a multi-timbral instrument? Thanks. So if, it's kind of an odd approach, I would think, but if you wanted to use those instruments, when you're doing it, so say we add an instrument track and we have Retrolog, all right, you would just set the MIDI input to come from your external sequencer. And at that point, so the MIDI coming in from your external sequencer, so, once that's coming in, that will generate the sound. Now, where the sound goes from there, if it's so, but yeah, you could definitely do it. So just set the input port appropriately coming from your external sequencer, and that MIDI information will come and play the instrument and generate it out through the audio interface. All right. So Tigerman Guitars is wondering if anyone else has had issues with the modulator going out of sync. I noticed it happening on one project. So I haven't had the modulators go out of sync. But if anyone else has, let me know. All right, so you see from 808 King says, follow up, I want to make a choppy sound like in Retrolog using maybe an LFO on the end to cut it off to make it speed up and speed down, automation or an LFO. Can you show me how to do that? All right, so let's take a look. Let's see if I get my MIDI controller to wake up here. Hang on. Yeah, my Nectar doesn't want to work today. All right. All right, so let's come over here. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's say he wants to make a choppy sound. So let me just find something with longer. Okay. I'll just quickly add a chord track and Okay. Okay, so now let's say we have okay, so let's take a look at the modulators, see if I understand it. Okay, when we make a choppy sound, all right, so if we want it to come over here, let's all right, so if we wanted to do choppy sound, let's say on a cutoff to make it speed up and slow down. So all right, let's come over here to the modulator. Okay, so let's say we will come over here. Let me just switch it to I'll just put it into different. All right, we'll put it into a shaper. Alright, so let's right now, if we wanted to assign like an LFO, now we could assign the LFO to this. We should be able to assign that alpha. Let me just. So let's say we want to change the note here. So we could now nudge. So you could do, so this way you could have the note And let's make this last for... So let me know if that's kind of what you're wanting to do, but basically you have one LFO kind of modulate another LFO if you needed to. All right, so we just see, it says I'm a fan of this program from Cubase 5, version 14, but it's very complicated and expensive. Well, feel free to ask any questions that you have so we can make it easier for you. All right, so we see a question from Dr. McFarland Studios. How often does Cubase release paid updates? So a lot of times, you know, I would say probably over the last 15 years, probably 12 out of 15 years, it's been on kind of like a yearly, roughly a year cycle. So, and that will often give, you know, several hundred new features for a paid update. So it's pretty significant. All right, so we have Bo from Denmark saying hi. FlyV says, do I ever miss my studio? I'm laughing out loud. So we just see I have to buy the extra plugins again. Is that fair? So any of the plugins. So if you're updating like your Cubase plugins, you don't have to pay to update your plugins. But the extra, so I'm not sure which extra plugins you have. If they're Steinberg plugins, a lot, you know, if they go through like going from a Hallion 6 to a Hallion 7, it might be a paid update for that. But all the plugins that come with the program, they're, you know, they come with the cost of the program. So, you know, some of the plugins have been in since Cubase SX1 and are still in the program. So. All right, so Chris asks, I want to know how to add a track to an existing group track. Okay, so let me just add a couple of tracks here. So I have an audio track, and let's add an existing group track. So we could come over here. All right, so we have our audio track, we have our group track. So this group track exists. There's two different ways. One is just to go to the outputs, and I could take this track and route it directly to the group. If I don't want to route it directly to the group, another method of getting this particular audio track to this audio track to the group is just to use sends. So if I go to this track, we can come over here. Let's go to our sends, and now I could send varying levels of different tracks to the group. So now this audio track is, if it's being routed to my stereo output, I could now send it to the stereo output and to the group in parallel. So we could do it just like that. So we could do direct routing here or use a send. And if we wanted to not use sends, if we were using our sends for everything, there's also direct routing. So you may have to right click and enable direct routing. So it's a third way. And I could say, okay, all my effect sends are being used for effects. And now I could just come right over here and I could route via direct routing to a group channel as well. So there's three different ways. One, just on the main routing output, send it to the group, or use a send or direct routing. All right, and how to remove a track from an existing group track. Okay, so let's say this track is being routed to the group track. If I come here, I could just say, okay, we're going to, instead of sending it to the group track, I send it to the stereo out. If it's using the send to come over here, I would just disable the send. Now this track isn't being sent to the group. Or if we have our direct outs, we would just make sure that we have no bus set for the direct outs. Next question. Also, can we create a new group track from an existing group, a group inside of a group? Yeah, so all you have to do is you could right click. And another method and if you want to send a group to a group, we could right click and say, let's add track, right click on the track, and you can say add group to selected channel. And now we can see that this audio track we could send to the group one, and then group one, its output we can send directly to, so we want to send this group, we could just come right over here and send that to the second group as well. So it's a same concept, but you could have nested groups. So all right, Alan from Scotland asks, hi all, sometimes when I use articulations, it fails to work from the first note quantized in the bar, i.e. it picks up the articulation trill half tone when I have it set to legato. So when you're utilizing, our different articulations, we'll come over here, let me just, depending on the instrument and how much is going on the instrument, it could be that, when we do an articulation change, depending on the instrument, you may have to give it just a little more time. So let's say if we come here and in my expression map, we'll import the key switches here. So realize that when you're switching back and forth between, different articulations, sometimes you may have to, it may have to load up 150 new samples, and that may take just a fraction of a time. So if you're, wanting to, let's say you wanted to switch to staccato here from let's say a trill, or let's say here we have a different articulation starting right there. So sometimes you may just have to give it a little bit more, just to give it a little bit of a head start to start the articulation. So once this note sounds, maybe just come over and then we could just kind of draw in. I'll just turn off my snap, and then you could choose to draw in the articulation slightly ahead of the beat. So, but realize that you could be switching hundreds or thousands of samples in an instant, and it may just take a little bit of time for for all the samples to load up. So if you run into that, just move your articulations a little ahead. All right, Flyv just says, watching Greg on the keyboards make me feel better. So we want you to feel good. So. All right, so Jam Studios asks, do you ever have folder sync losing sync on you? I have this issue daily since Cubase 8. So let me just take a look. All right, so let's say I have a folder here. So I'm not sure when you say folder sync, if it is like, okay, so let's say if we come here, I'm not sure if you're, maybe Jam Studios, if you could ask, like, like where the folder sync, where you're accessing it from. But I'm not sure if it's like if you're dealing with track versions or not. So let's say let me just jump over to so let's say if we have this in a folder, so I'm not sure if when you're saying the folder sync, if it is like, let's say if I come here and let's say convert, let me open up all my lanes, and let's say if I have these converted to tracks. Okay, so let's say if we have all of these on different track versions, let me just all right, so, but let me know if it's in like the track version area that you're running into and you want to, at this point, let's say we select this and like kind of doing a comp with track versions. So if you could let me know, that would be helpful for me, Jam Studios. Sorry for not understanding. Wonderful to see Best Korean Jesus on from San Diego area. All right, so we see Zach Pope's question, which I think we answered already about maybe plugins. All right, so we see from McQuellen says, "Hey Greg, can I see RMS on Cubase?" So if you wanted to kind of see, like what the so if you want to see like in the meters, here you can see kind of the RMS maximum directly there. You could also, if you wanted, I'm not sure if I misunderstand, but if you go to your audio statistics, here you can see what the RMS is of the file. And that would be for each of the segments. And if you go into your MixConsole, you can get kind of an idea. So you can see your channel volume, and you could see your peak level, and you could reset that, but you get an idea visually from that. All right, Vershawn79 says, "Hey Greg, does anyone suggest using the tab key to move to the next name when naming tracks in the mix window? Just an idea for future release." All right, let's give it a try, just see if I'm renaming. Yes, it doesn't work in the MixConsole window, but it will work on the main project window. And I would say, arguably, I'll pass it along. But let's say if I come here, I think it's pretty cool to be able to just kind of come here. And obviously, this is reflected directly in, as we come over here into the different naming windows. But I guess I'll pass that along as a feature request. It may not be the highest priority because I think most people would name the tracks in the track area, but I can see where it can make sense for consistency's sake. All right, so we have the process just saying, I found my people. All right, Ryan Thomas just asks, hi, does Cubase show a message when the CPU is overloaded, or do we have to check the red line for dropouts? Does the red vertical line in performance meter mean I need to change something to save CPU? All right, so let me just open up kind of a larger project here. All right, so you're not going to get a message saying, your CPU is overloading, but you can get a sense of how responsive the program becomes. But let's say if we're kind of here, we're working with a project. All right, so now we could look at, in 14, there's a new performance meter. So when we come over here, we can say, let's go to our audio performance meter. So we can see that now if we were running into issues, now let's say on this one track, if I wanted to put, we'll see, we'll have some more instruments coming in. So more instruments, we see just a slight CPU bump. We'll have the drums coming in a second. Drums come in about a bar. So we'll probably use more CPU once the drums kick in, and I'll fast forward just a little bit. All right. Now let's say I put, let's say I'm going to put just too many plugins on that it can take a lot of CPU resources. Say I'll put all right, so we won't worry about what's going to delay kind of sound wise with the vocal, but I'll put on like a really heavy preset here. So each of these multi-tap delays is about 8 plugins on it with this preset. All right, so now when we look at our performance meter, we can see that the performance meter. All right, so we haven't had any audio dropouts. I'll just keep adding some more here. So this is all kind of utilizing one CPU core. All right, so as we kind of start climbing up, so we haven't had any audio dropouts yet. Let me fast forward. Put a vocal chain in. So eventually you may get messages, okay, now we added this. We could see in our audio performance meter which track is causing dropouts. And if we wanted to freeze, so this will give us an idea. So we could say, okay, we could increase the buffer size, we could increase the ASIO guard, or we could choose to freeze the track. And this would mitigate this CPU overload. So as soon as we start getting into CPU overload area, in Riser we're using like probably 60, 70 plugins on one CPU core, which is why we see the audio performance. Not CPU usage, different. But this would give us an idea of exactly what's causing the CPU performance. So if we say, okay, let's freeze that, we could choose to freeze, and we can now just simply mitigate the overall CPU, the audio performance. So, but that will give you a clue as to what is causing that performance increase right there. And I think it's Jazz Dude usually mentions that, you know, the audio performance is not the same thing as CPU performance. So, but Cubase now will give you an idea of what is causing audio performance issues for you. All right, so we see from Manfig from Santa Barbara says, thank you for answering all the questions I have. Is Windows 11, Cubase 14, UR44C, longtime user since Cubase 3.0. Thank you, Greg. Awesome. So thanks for joining the live streams, and we're happy you've been such a long time Cubase user. Appreciate it. I remember when Cubase 3 came out. All right, so we just see a question from Kamal Jeet Singh. Whenever I take any track in my project, its volume is reduced by default by 5 dB. How to fix that? So usually, so let's just take a look and see. So when I go to add tracks, do new project. All right, so let's add 5 audio tracks. They're all set here to 0 dB. We could see in our fader position right there. So I'm not sure if you're starting from a template could cause that, but if you're just adding audio tracks fresh, I don't think that there's a preference. Let me just... I know that when we get to VST, like our plugins, we could have the default send level set to -6, but I don't think there's a default send like volume level. If you are starting, you know, from a track preset, you know, or importing tracks, and if your track preset was down -5 dB, that would automatically be carried over. So let me know, Kamal Jeet, if it is actually, you know, if you're just adding tracks and showing up as -5 dB. All right, Joe Goldberg asks, hey Greg, I'm getting a half-second delay on playback using a Mac. I press spacebar and it starts playing after half a second. Not immediately. What would be the cause of that? So if you have a high, you know, it could be the processing plugin. So if you have a lot of plugins on your project, so right now when I hit play, so when we start a new project here, I hit spacebar and I'll hit it loud so you can hear the mic. You see that it will respond instantly. Now, if we have lots of plugins in your project, so I will come over here. Let's go to this audio track. Now, each plugin can have its own latency. So I'm going to add the vocal chain because this has a pretty high latency because this plugin does so much. So more sophisticated plugins, and we could look at this. If we right click and we go to setup sections, you could actually see kind of the latency directly here for every channel. So now when adding that one plugin is added 236 milliseconds of latency. So I'm going to add another instance of that plugin, and we will say, okay, let's get to the vocal chain. All right, so now when I hit play, and I'll move my mic close so you could hear the space bar hit, and I'll try to hit the space bar loudly. We can see that pause when it actually starts playing. And that's because it needs to compensate for the latency of plugins. So if you go to your MixConsole, and you can see this also in the MixConsole here. So if you go to the channel latency, here we can get an idea of exactly how much latency is going to be on your particular system. So we could just come over here. Let's say, okay, we want to scroll down here. So now we could see the latency for every single channel just right here. So it's probably just a channel latency. So if you have a lot of heavy plugins in your project, you know, all those plugins, and we could think of the tax for running kind of a heavy plugin could be just the channel latency that's going to be in your project. So what Cubase is going to do is, you know, when you hit play, that is when all the latency is being compensated for. So that would probably be the solution. So check that out. All right, wonderful to see Michael Marshall checking in from Somerset in the UK. Thanks for joining us. All right. All right, maybe I skipped Val's question. Let me scroll back. Make sure I didn't see it. All right, so I see the last question is about on the channel, the pre's enabled by default. And then I see another question from Val. This is at an hour and 51 minutes in, right before Chris's question about the groups. And to see another question, let me see, but I don't see that question. So maybe Val, if you could ask your question again. All right, wonderful to see Graham Witcher checking in from Oxford in England. All right, so we had a question. It says how to select a set of notes spread over several containers and perform a progressive reduction of their velocities, like a decrescendo. Okay. Okay, so let's say I want to take these 4 parts here. I'm going to go into the key editor. Let's look at the velocities. Okay, so we come here, and I think what we want to do, and if we go to like the full screen, we'll see like this little plus sign kind of indicated here, so we can see these. I'm going to click so that this square is not a plus sign, but rather kind of a square to the selected channels. And now if I wanted to just come over here, so let's say I want to take these selected parts, and I could just grab my line and do a crescendo of the velocities across all the parts just like that. So this way we could still edit multiple parts. So you want to go into the full screen and then just come over here, and you could, as we selected, you could just see, let's see, have another, but you'll see like the little square, clicking the square so it's a check. And then you could just decrescendo or do a crescendo across multiple events like that. So if I want to do this for all of the events through the end, I could just do it like that, and I could edit those multiple parts together, even if they're not the currently active selected event. All right, we have Rick France checking in from the Pacific Northwest. Beautiful area of the country. Miss going there. All right, so we see from it says if I duplicate a VSTI track requiring RAM, is the consumption performance requirement itself doubled or not, since there's no new resource requested? Thank you. So, so you know, once you, let's say if you, let me just go to like a really heavy Hallian instrument. So, you know, it could depend if it's VST3 instruments and they're, you know, you could have it where it's not going to take any CPU power until it is, and there's a preference where it's not going to take any CPU power under, if we go to VST3 plugins, to suspend VST3 plugin processing. So, but if it's playing back twice as many voices, it, you know, it's logical to me that it would take twice as much the resources. So let's say if I come, let's do like a really heavy multi-patch. So do okay, so if I come, all right, so this is for instruments. All right, so let's come over here. I'll just record. All right, now I will double these pitches, up an octave, down an octave. All right, so now we have 3 octaves, so 12 voices, and this playing. And let's open up our audio performance. And we'll just duplicate the tracks here. So as you can see, if we are using the same, if we're doubling what's being requested of the computer, it will take up more CPU. So if I disable these tracks, see less CPU, or less audio usage if we enable these tracks. So if using twice the instruments, it will take twice the CPU. So we will go ahead and enable these. See the performance increase there. So we'll take more CPU, more audio performance. All right, so we see Joe Goldberg says there's no plugin, empty project still happens. Let me just scroll back, see if it's just the... so you have a half-second delay in playback using a Mac. So let me know also what the buffer size is of your audio interface, Joe, because the buffer size could also matter. It shouldn't be half a second. I'm not sure if the buffer would do that, but you know, make sure that there's like no plugins in your control room if you're using any like room correction plugins of any type, kind of like SonarWorks, you know, those types of plugins as well can have a difference. Even so, there could be plugins resident in your system without it necessarily being in the project. All right. So it says using an SSL2. So you could try lowering the buffer all the way, and also make sure that you're using the dedicated. I guess you're using the core audio driver if you're on Mac. Okay, Uno Momento wants people to whack the like button. All right, so we see question, how to save a script I made for Stream Deck. So if you are just running a MIDI remote script, so it will automatically, as soon as you are building it, it's automatically saved within Cubase. If you wanted to export it, if we come over to the settings window, we could come to scripts. And if you wanted to save this, you could just choose to, you'll see an export script. We just say, I want to come here. Let's select this. And now you'll have the export script option right there. Then you could back it up and archive it if you want. So once again, go to the MIDI remote, click on the settings. You can select the scripts tab, select the script and export script, and then you could choose to import the script as well. Okay, so you see from Audio Nomi, just says, even with all the containers option acting on the window, displaying this, the speeds only changes the active track. I'm talking about containers that are supposed to be played at the same time. All right, so say if we want to come over here, let's just chop up. Okay, so let's say if I come here, and let me duplicate. Here, I'll just select all the notes. All right, so let me just, so let's say we split a whole bunch of notes, and let's duplicate these notes. So I guess you want to do it kind of at the same time. So let me duplicate track. So I think we could do this maybe in the project logical editor. So, or not in the project, but the MIDI logical editor. So let's say we want to transform velocity. We can say inside range, or right, so let's say we just want to transform velocity. We might just want to say notes, and we want to take the velocity and linear change in loop range. So let's say we want to go from 100 to 10. Okay, and I have those selected. So now if I want to look at the velocity of these notes, the velocity of those notes, so this way I could change the velocity. So let's say I just have these velocities completely randomized. Okay, so we look at the velocity of this one, the velocity of that, the velocity of that. So I want to select these values here, so they're all happening kind of in the same time. I'm going to just hit the letter P after selecting them, and now each of their velocities will go from 100 down to 10. Just like that. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we see Joe Goldberg asks, what is the core audio driver in Mac? Sorry, I'm a bit bad with tech. So when we actually are so on the Mac OS platform, how it communicates with audio drivers is going to be what they call a core audio. So that's the name of the driver. On a Windows platform, there's kind of the Windows sound drivers, MME drivers, and there's also the most widely used by far for DAWs is going to be ASIO. So what we allow you to do is once you go to your studio menu, you go to the studio setup, and here you would see the ASIO driver, and this is where you would select. So as soon as you have an audio interface connected to your system, it would show up here, and this is the driver where you'd want to use for, and where you select the driver that Cubase is using for your setup. Now, when you're working here, so, if you're on the Windows platform, if you're using kind of like the Windows driver versus the dedicated ASIO driver, the Windows driver would have increased latency, significantly increased latency C. So, but we don't really have that so much on the Mac OS. But, check to make sure it's also, if you get the same results, Joe, when you hit play on the transport if you have the same delay when you hit play versus the keyboard. Sometimes it could be like a Bluetooth USB keyboard that's not communicating so well and not as responsive. You may not notice it in other applications. So check to make sure that it is actually, you have the same timing here. And if it's completely empty, make sure that if you have the control room set up, that there's nothing there. If you're starting with an empty project and you hit play, and it's a half second, generally that's always going to be caused by a plugin. But make sure, if you have, if it's, and see if you switch, from your SSL driver, and you could go to your built-in audio and see if you have the same delay. And if you don't have the same delay in built-in audio, it's going to be something with your audio interface. So, but usually that delay is going to be coincides and correlates to the latency that's going to be caused by the audio interface and plugins that are operating in real time. All right, wonderful to see Michael Romanowski from Coast Mastering, who asks, I think he's nominated again for Grammys all this year. So congratulations, Michael. I hope to see you if you're going to NAMM. Says, hey, Greg, I'm having a problem with sounds in Groove Agent and other Steinberg VST instruments. All are in default locations, but I can't get any to load. Can you help sort out Groove Agent and Hallian parts? So usually when you come over, it's easy to, when you do the install on Cubase, or I know you're running Nuendo, so let's say if we come over here and you're doing your install, make sure that you've actually installed all of the content. So you'll see that you have Hallian Sonic content, Groove Agent content, Pad Shop content. So make sure that, and there's other instruments, Iconica, Sketch, Verve, online sound effects. So make sure that all this content is actually installed. A lot of times people may install the plugin, but not the content. But if you have an instrument here, so just come over, let's add an instrument track. We'll start with Groove Agent. So let's say we have Groove Agent SE that comes with the program. So now as soon as I right click, we could just say, okay, we should see all of the available installed content here. And we could just double click and load up the sound and start playing. So we can go to our different patterns. So usually, and you could also see if your content is installed by coming over and going to your media, go to VST Instruments. So let's say if I want to go to find a Hallian 7, we should see all the content libraries appear directly here. And as we go to our content, we could just say, okay, I want to go to my FM synth. And, this comes with the full version of Hallian, not necessarily the Hallian Sonic. And now we could. So, but all the content should just show up directly right here. And if you go to, let's say, so Hallian doesn't come with Cubase or Nuendo, but Hallian Sonic does, and it'll be very similar. So once we come over here, we could see all the content libraries, and at this point we could just load up the particular instrument. So, but check to make sure that one, that you did in fact install the content. A lot of people will, I'll do that later because it's a lot of storage space that's needed. I don't need it now. So you may have the instrument, but if you don't see these, make sure that the content is actually downloaded and installed. And let me know from there, Michael. Hope you're well. Happy New Year. All right, B Complex asks, hi Greg, thanks for another amazing stream. What is your preferred metering plugin? Does Cubase have any audio signal monitoring? So I really like the SuperVision plugin. So if we come over here, we could start off with SuperVision. So let's say if we were playing a project here, we'll jump back to this project here. All right, make sure I revert this so it doesn't sound awful, because I'm sure I've destroyed it. All right, so let's say we want to open up my SuperVision meter so we can see kind of our signal level, and we have up to 9 different meters. So there's all these different meter options that come with it. So let's say to the right, I'm going to add a meter to the right by clicking on this icon here. And I want this to be VU meter. I could resize it, and let's say I want to come over, let's add a meter below. I want this to be, let's say, multi-correlation, so we can see different. I want to add a meter below this, which will be, let's say, our phase scope. And if I want to add a meter, let's say below this one, we could just kind of keep adding different meters. So we do kind of spectrum intensity. And from within that meter, we could add a meter to the right to divide. See kind of a loudness histogram. So or let's look at a different phase. So let's say panorama. And then each of these meters can be customized quite a bit. So if you want to change, it be based on time. If you want it to be dots versus lines. So you can kind of do this. And again, all completely resizable. So all sorts of great options. And if you want to get really crazy about it, you could also... there's a cute little thing, a little Easter egg that you could actually now play Pong if you want. So you could backward engineer how to do that. So just a little Easter egg inside of SuperVision that you could play games when you're bored. So just come over here, it will get faster. So all sorts of wonderful meters. I think SuperVision is really a great one to work with. All right. All right, so we see Audionomi just says, in fact, I would like to create a decrescendo on all the instruments which are played at the same time while preserving the naturalness of their variations in intensity. So if it's, so let's just jump back. I think I still have that project. All right, so let's say we have this project. So let's say if we have our so we'll come here, let's look at our, let's say I have this naturalness here. And we wanted to preserve these natural contours. So it could depend on the instrument. So let's say we have this going on. We have all right. So if now we wanted to, let's see if we could insert. Let's see if we go to our MIDI, so different instruments will respond to dynamics in different ways. So let's see if we could insert like MIDI CCs. So we'll say subtype and let's see if we could come here. Let's say we'll look at main volume. All right, so let's see if we could. All right, so depending on the instrument itself, I mean, you could just, if you want to do a decrescendo, you could just do MIDI volume. Now, but it could depend, like if you're doing MIDI volume, that may not work, like for, that could work or may not work depending on what the instrument is responding to dynamically. But let me just see if we could. Let's say if we have. So, but so it could change. So let me just see if we have this. If I have all the notes selected here, let's see if we can. Let me just see if we insert controller CC7. Let's see if we could. Yes, I'm not sure if we could do. I could play around with this some more and see if we could do. But I don't see like the linear loop range. But let me know if that's what you want to do. If you wanted to do like MIDI CC7, but sometimes the velocity may be more, depending on the type of instrument. Orchestral instruments, like if you wanted to have the dynamics change within a long held note, that could be handled differently than others notes and how the instrument will respond. Yeah, so I guess going back to your question, it's like while preserving the naturalness of their variations in intensity, is like how the instrument is getting its naturalness and variations in intensity. Okay, Richard Carpenter just says educational. All right, so we see Masiak just says, I see they have a lot to learn, not to mention using any more advanced features. Be Complex says, laughing out loud that the Pong game got him. All right, so just see about the question about the MIDI controllers is exactly like we do on a solo instrument in a MIDI container, only after selecting the MIDI notes with the bend data rate tool, but in multiple containers playing the same time. So let me know if you wanted to just do, so if you want to be able to have the same like MIDI CC7, like if it's going to be MIDI CC7, and if you want like this to be applied to others. So let's say if we copy, let's see if we come here. So here we've extracted it to a separate track when we say copy, but let me just all right, so let's try this approach. So let's say I have this CC data. I want to take this CC data and I'm going to select it. I'm going to save this as a preset and we'll try this in a macro. Okay, so now let's come over to create a macro. All right, so let's so we want to select. We're going to take that key command. We're going to copy. We're going to nudge down. right, so let me just... So we're going to nudge down and then paste. Let's do paste in origin. And then we're going to glue. All right, so right now this has MIDI CC 7. This one has no MIDI CC 7. This one has CC 7. So let's take a look, see what happens. If we want this, I could spend some more time in a macro, but let's... All right, so it looks like it worked for the first one. So let me just select all the events here. All right, and let me see if I need to add maybe a select none at the end. Okay, so no main volume here. Let's say we have main volume here. So I'm going to select that. Let's run the macro. All right, so we look at this event. We can see that the CC7 has been copied. We look at this event, there's no CC7, so I'll run the same macro. And now the CC7 has been applied. So let me know if that's helpful for you. So once you draw it in once, you could just enter that in multiple times. So that way we could copy that CC7 data from one track to the track below. So we do one logical editor and then incorporate that within the macro. So, all right. So let me know if that is helpful for your workflow. All right, and we're just saying that it says I usually select all the notes and then lower the handle on the right to create a natural decrescendo. This works well. So I guess, so it could really depend. So if we have, let's say I have all of these, let's say I have all the notes selected here. So if you want to like do that for multiple events. I could work on that, but let me know if that's kind of what you want to do. So if it is varied, so let's say we have our natural variations here, and you want to, let's come over here and just drag it down like that. You want to do that for multiple events. I could, if that's what you want, I could work and see if I get and see if I come up with something, but I don't know if I can, just because I don't think that this is addressable in a keyboard shortcut. But you might be able to, depending how long the part is. One thing else you could do is, so let's say if we are here, is to save that as a quantized preset. So if you want it to go to the quantized panel, I could drag this event over. We'll set our position to 0, our velocity to 100. And now I could come over here, and let's say we have our velocity. I could now just quantize and apply the velocity from one part to other parts. And I think that once we do this, so let's say I've applied the velocity to these parts. That I could select these two parts at the same time. And now that I had the velocity set to 100%, now those parts would all maintain the same velocity settings directly there. So that could be another approach, is just drag that part into a quantized panel. Seems a little unintuitive at first. And then you could select multiple events and apply, set the position to 0%, set the velocity to 100%, and then you could copy, in essence, copy those particular events' velocities values. And I think you have like 16 or 32 measures that you could work with that. So all right. And Jazz Dude just mentions that, you know, for orchestral libraries it may not work depending on what's all been applied. All right. All right, and you see if he wants to do it on multiple containers. So let's say I will come over here. So I have this as my velocity, let's say. All right, and this I have totally flat. We're fairly flat. So now if I want to duplicate these particular events, I could say, okay, this is the one that we made. Now I want to take these and apply the quantize. And as we double click, we can see that that quantized value, those velocity settings have been applied to multiple selected parts horizontally or multiple parts vertically. All right, so Val just says, why does his question always disappear? So sometimes if you use too many characters, you may run into that. So sorry if your question's not coming through. All right, so let's jump to some of the other mailed in questions. All right. So we had a question: how do I save selected tracks and recall their MixConsole settings? Excuse me, in the mixer. Okay, so let's say we have a number of channels and we go to our MixConsole and we can see that we have lots of different, so we'll make this larger. So we'll see that we're going to have lots of different inserts and EQ settings across these particular channels. Okay, so what we could do if I wanted to copy and save these, I'm going to select them here. And then we could go to the little settings cogwheel here, and we could choose to save settings. So we'll see save selected mix, save selected channels, and we could give it a name. Okay, so I'm going to now add, let's say I want to get rid of these tracks here. Let's remove the selected tracks, and I want to add 8 audio tracks. So now that I have these 8 tracks selected, what I could do is come over and we will say we want to load selected channels. And we'll go to desktop. I think we call this January. Let me just January 14th, 2025, and now all of the settings have been transferred over. So if you're looking for that, just go into the MixConsole, and this works in the large screen mixer. So go to the settings cogwheel here, select the channels or the lower zone MixConsole, since they're essentially the same now, and save the selected channels, select the channels, and now you could load the selected channels, and that will be all the EQs, inserts, channel strip for each of the tracks. Okay, next question we had is how to get lyrics in a standard MIDI file. We had this from last Friday, so let me just... All right, so let's say we have our lyrics. We have a MIDI event here, and we'll look at it in the score editor. Okay, so I just came over here. Let's look at it in the score editor. So I just went and added lyrics. So if we go to click on the T, and then we could just come right over here and select to add the lyrics. So we said here is hot. Let me just, I'll try that. How to export the lyrics. Okay, so I have this in my MIDI data, so I'm going to go ahead and solo this MIDI file. So we don't have to go into the list editor like I was thinking last Friday. So I'm going to now come over here. Let's select. I'm going to solo this track and export the MIDI file so it only includes that. We will come over here, export the MIDI file. And we'll say Jan 14th, 2025 lyrics. Okay. And you can see all the elements that I've selected. So we'll just call this lyrics. Hit OK. So I'm going to do a new project. And when we come over here, let's import a MIDI file. We won't create a new project. Here's our lyrics MIDI file, which we just created just a minute ago. Import that. And now when we look at the MIDI data, we'll look at it in the list editor. We'll come over here, and then we could see the lyrics are automatically associated with the note and will happen at a very specific time, and all the lyrics are retained in the standard MIDI file for us. So once again, enter the lyrics in the score editor. And we can see that now, even we could see that just looking at that, we could see that it's automatically opened up in the score editor as well. And then export, and then those lyrics will be maintained within the standard MIDI file. All right, so we have a question. Greg, I have Cubase 5 on eLicenser on an old Windows 7 machine. I'd like to keep it running indefinitely. So is it possible to create a new eLicenser backups on separate USB drives? What are the rules on that? So you can transfer the license to a new eLicenser. So if your eLicenser's like maybe a bit old and you don't think, and you think that maybe having a fresh new eLicenser would give you more longevity, you could transfer the license to a new USB eLicenser. When the eLicenser service shuts down sometime this year, you won't be able, so you have a single license, and that license is stored on a USB eLicenser. You can't migrate it to 3 or 4 eLicenser USB keys. But once the server is shut down, you won't be able to transfer it to a new eLicenser key or update from that eLicenser version. So since you have one license, you have your one license that could be moved to other USB eLicensers, but it doesn't allow you to back it up to 3 or 4 eLicensers. I still have the same eLicenser since 2001. And I run it in my personal studio. It's kind of a longer one, and it's still going strong. So you probably have 20 years of use. You'd be more likely to not have a USB-A connection port on your computer than a new eLicenser failing. That would probably happen first. So it's only going to be backed up to or moved to one single USB eLicenser. You can't have multiple eLicensers with the same license. All right, so we had a question. Says, when working with the Atmos project, I was curious about the best practices to bounce channel-based formats in Nuendo. For example, in AirDAWs, you can quickly export multiple different channel formats if the client asks for it, and export specific groups and stems within the Nuendo renders as possible in Nuendo. So you could obviously, if you do multi-export, you could do all of the different groups. So we'll show that, but let's take a look at let's say if we have our Atmos guitar. So let's say we have a project here with a guitar that's kind of panning around. If you have headphones on, you may be hearing the binaural. And it kind of spinning around the room as we do the panning. Hear this. All right, so now what I want to do, if I wanted to export it, let's say to a 5.1 or different format. So one is if we come over, let's say to our renderer channel, and when we go to look at, let's say, our inserts here, we'll have so we'll just come over here and we'll see our renderer plugin. So if right now I have it set to binaural, if I had 5.1 speakers, I could now listen to it kind of how it would be represented in the 5.1 playback. So if you have 5.1 monitors, this is often what you would choose. And what I want to do is just come over, and we can do this for different channel configurations, but would say I want to go to my audio connections. So we're going to go from kind of an object-based to a channel-based. I'm going to add an output. I'm going to add, let's say, a 5.1 output. So we'll come over here, and on my bed channel, we'll open this up, and I want to go to my sends, and I want to send this to my 5.1 out. Okay, so I will come over here, we'll send it at 0 dB. And now when I go to export audio mix down, I'll say let's export the 5.1 interleaved file. We'll make it interleaved, and we will create an audio track, and we can do the same for if we want to do stereo as well. So I could just come right over here. Let's go to our export queue. I'll say let's add to queue. Let's do our stereo mix down. We'll make sure that our bed, that we're also going out to stereo. We are. Okay. So you see my stereo mix down, and now I can add to queue. And both of these we want to create audio tracks, so we'll start our queue export. If I did everything right. So now we can see our stereo mix down, and we could see our 5.1 interleaved mix down. So try going into MixConsole and setting, and on the bed channel, route it to like your 5.1 or stereo out, and at that point, just do your mix down from the export audio mix down. You could select both of those. So we'll go to your audio mix downs, and you could say, okay, I want to go to my 5.1 out, my 7.1.4, my stereo out, and render those files appropriately. Okay, we covered the next one. All right, so we had a question in the last live stream, and it was about, it says, where they had moved the project file to a different computer, and then the vocals weren't playing, or the audio files weren't playing. It says I tried I auditioned some of the files in the pool. All the files I auditioned are playing the vocals, so the files are there. I've also double checked the location paths of the files, and they're correct. Still no sound when playing back the project in Cubase, though. That's what's the next step you'd suggest. I did try something else that someone recommended in a Facebook group. I copied the project back to the broken SSD. I'm assuming this step was unnecessary, though. Opened it and selected back up the project and chose to back it up from the new location. This actually worked, and I can hear the vocals again. The problem with this method is that all my Melodyne edits are gone. Why wouldn't they also be backed up with the project? Or regret not bouncing those tracks before moving them, but I was worried about the broken SSD, so I didn't think about that at the time. So hopefully get my Melodyne audio edits back. I'd rather see if I can get it working with the project and currently have no audible vocals. So, if everything, check to see if, like when you're on the new drive, if you have ARA extensions. So let's say if we're here and we see the extensions, just make sure that these extensions are going to the right spot where you expect, or try setting it to no extension and see if that makes any difference at all. Another thing that I would try is also just, instead of opening up the project directly, is to do an import tracks from project, and then we want to basically, select the particular project and try just selecting all and see if that carries it over as well. But you didn't mention in the last time that there is ARA extensions, so it could be that maybe those tracks are being sent out to an ARA extension that's not routed correctly here. So, maybe it was installed in a different order on your new drive, or there's a different number of ARA extensions on your drive and it's off. Maybe it's going to an unintended ARA extension. So I would check those to make sure that if you have ARA extensions, that those are being routed. And if it's like all your vocals, maybe they're all going to a Melodyne ARA extension and that's not showing up there, or it's being routed to a different ARA. So those are, and if not, try just to import the tracks, go to File to import and tracks from project and see if you get different results from that. All right, so I think we had a question. This is kind of a follow-up question, and it is dealing with the chord pads. And the question that we had initially was, says, when I first open a chord pads, the default key is C major, so it looks something like this. Now in Cubase 13 and 14, this isn't the default one. I actually created this and I think I named it default, but the actual this isn't the actual default file. If you're using a template, maybe from Cubase 12 or earlier, this may be your default template. And then the question is, I go to a template, let's say Bohemian chords, and we get those chords. And now when we go back to the default, that these are kind of the C minor. So this is a one named default. So this is the default plugins for Cubase 13 and 14. So maybe if you let's say the one I had loaded up, like I just made a preset because I didn't want this as my default. And I just think I just called it major chord as a preset. So this was like and then this is kind of, I think this would, if I go to a new project, this would be I think it carries over. So we look at this. But check, because the ones that you said it went back to the wrong one is actually the default chord progression, the chord pads for Cubase 13 and 14. So that's some of the settings that had changed. So maybe just save what you have, what you start off with as a preset. So I think I made this preset for major chord. And if you're starting from a template, maybe the template does that. But when you go to click on the default preset, that the default preset is this. So I think it's maybe just the terminology, and it's maybe a different default preset than what you're starting with that's causing it. Okay, so we have a question from Australia. So we see, my question is, how do you move the start point simultaneously for multiple selected events by dragging the start point on one event? This was easy in Cubase VST. You could select multiple events, then you drag the event start point on one event and move them all in sync to the selected events. All right, so let's take a look. Just pop up. Yeah, this file would work. Okay, so let's say I move all of these events. I have all of these events in my project window. So we don't necessarily like grab by the handle, but if you just select in the body of any of the events, you could just drag all of your events kind of just like so it's not necessarily dragging from the beginning, but just selecting your multiple events and then you could move them kind of as all the events are selected. So it's probably different behavior than Cubase VST, pre-SX, but you could just now, whatever all the events, just, you could select all of your events here. And if you want to just, let's say, switch it here. So let's take it off. So now all of these events are selected. We can move those collectively as a group. And if you want, so that's probably the easiest way to do it. All right, so we had a question. I saw this video of the new Nectar CS12 controller, and I was wondering if it's possible to, just as in the video, change the clip gain of a selected event with a rotary knob on a MIDI device like a keyboard or a simple controller. He also controls zooming in and out horizontally. Is it possible? All right, so when we go to, let's say, our MIDI remote here, all right, so it depends if you want to do it from a single button. And I watched a video, and probably the Nectar is a clever controller in that when you move it one direction, it transmits one MIDI CC. You move it, so let's say you move it clockwise, it may transmit one MIDI CC. You move it counterclockwise, it could move it a different CC value. So a lot of controllers do that. Most simple MIDI controllers generally don't do that. So let's say if I want to come here, let's say we want to adjust our event volume. So I could, let's say we select this event here. All right, so I could have one knob that does decrement event volume and another knob that increments. So because my controller, this Chord Nano Control, is only transmitting one MIDI CC message. So I could have one that does the event increase, I could decrement or increment. Now, if the controller on your MIDI keyboard can transmit a MIDI message going clockwise and a different MIDI message going counterclockwise, then you could use a single knob. And we could do the same for kind of dealing with zoom. So I have one control to zoom in and another control to zoom out. So we could do that. And again, this is just a limitation of my MIDI controller. And I think that when you notice that the person was doing it, it was one specific knob, not every single knob. So it's probably that one knob. And it's often controllers that are designed to have like a jog scrub wheel that they'll have different MIDI CC messages for clockwise versus counterclockwise. All right, let me jump back to live questions. Thanks for all the great questions. See, John Barry just says he likes that use of quantize for velocity. All right. So we see about the question with the velocity. So if you want to send it to me by email, you could reach me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. So we see Eric Fox. Hello, Greg. Is there a chance in the future updates at Cubase EQ curve when the mixer could show other EQs like a Pro Q4 or other besides the Cubase EQ? So I don't think I wouldn't anticipate that. I mean, it's anything. We always think that anything in software is possible, but probably wouldn't. The user interface. I don't have a Pro Q4 license or any of the FabFilter licenses, but I think there's also a consideration of trying to make that work within the channel strip settings. So when I see pictures of Pro Q4, it's always like such a a much larger space for doing the EQ controls. So I wouldn't anticipate that, and I think that we want to have like that setting be consistent for everyone that uses Cubase. So as opposed to now I can't load any of my projects because this plugin isn't updated with this new operating system, but Cubase is, or this isn't compatible, with this processor. So it gets to be kind of a whole. There's lots of consequences with integrations like that. We've done, and anyone who's been using audio plugins for a long time can get upset when they've invested a lot of money in plugins and suddenly, they don't get updated. So it could be frustrating and out of our control. So I wouldn't anticipate that, but obviously you could run it as a, insert plugin, and you could change the position within the signal flow for it as well. Okay, so I think we have Val's question that Jazz Dude was kind enough to copy and paste from the Discord. All right, and his question is, can I do a module knob or VCA that controls the high pass and the low pass of any selected channel simultaneously? I can route them, but they don't move when I use the macro knob. All right, so I'll try the macro knob real quick here. So let's say let's get to the modulation. All right, so I'm going to open up the channel EQ here. Sorry. All right. All right, so I'm not sure if you have turned on the EQ or not. But let's. Okay, and I will come over here. Let's move. All right, so let's see. All right, so it looks like they're both controlling our frequencies here. So let me just turn this on. I would think that would work, but doesn't seem to be. All right, let me just see if pre-gain works on it. Yeah, I mean, my first inclination would be to do the macro knob. I'll try it one more time just to make sure I'm not going crazy. Let's see if we could take a different approach on it. All right, so controlling it individually. All right, so let's say if we do this for a step modulator, and we don't put a value in. Yeah, I'll play around with that, but I'll report it because it seems like the macro knob should be working with that. So sorry about that. I'll make sure to report that. All right, Steve Green asks, says, hi Greg, if I closed a project and come back to it another time, if I don't like what I've done, is there a way of going through history of the project that I closed to find an earlier change? So you might be able to recover it from a backup project. So there isn't a way to do that once you save it. You're kind of saving it in its current state. What a lot of people will do, especially, you know, us older people that have been working with computers when they weren't stable, is incremental backups. So like as you are working, just do a save as. So I know a lot of people will save a project every day because a project file can be pretty small. And then we'll kind of build on that so that they have the flexibility to go back and do that. But once the project is closed, your undo histories are kind of eradicated at that time. Otherwise, your project could be just so, unnecessarily large. So if you want to work that way, consider doing incremental saves in your project. All right, so we see Peter Bada says, sadly, iLock Manager no longer sees my USB e-licenser key. It is only about 3 years old. I've spent the last few days going over back and forth with the folks over at iLock. So, the USB e-licenser, if it's like the Steinberg, the e-licenser is a completely separate technology. So, like, the e-licenser is not going to read an iLock. They conceptually do very similar things. And the iLock won't see the USB e-licenser. So they're two separate. So you would need to probably open up the e-licenser control center. And then once you do that, then you could see your various keys and what licenses are on that particular key. All right. So we see from Menschmeyer, it says how to change between the takes. It says my Woostling is how to change between the takes. So if you want to change between takes, like in a stacked recording, what you could do is come over. Let's just find my compt. Okay, I'll revert. All right, so if we have like a stacked recording, if I go to the bottom center, and here I have like multiple takes in lanes. So if I open up the lanes, I could use the comp tool, which looks like a hand, and I could switch to a different take. Now, if I didn't want to open up all the lanes, if you go to the bottom center, you could just choose to audition different takes right here. So you see all your takes, and then you could switch. So let me know if that's helpful or if it's yet another question. All right, so Val42 or Y42 says in the control room, what is the order? I have some plugins like SuperVision on the monitor insert slots, but when I turn down the volume, it influences the level there. All right, so I think that we could have. All right, so we go to the inserts here. So we have global inserts at the bottom. So let's say I go to my SuperVision plugin, and I'll just do a brand new one to make it simpler here. All right, so if I adjust my control room volume, we notice that this level doesn't adjust. So I'm not putting it on the insert slots of my monitors. So let's see if we open up SuperVision here and we adjust my monitor, but go to the bottom and you may have to go to the main tab and then expose that, and then your control room volume won't be affected. So let's say we close both of these out. Now I go to the SuperVision in the main area of the control room, and we could just not have any impact. It's just our monitoring path. So whereas this one, if we do it in the monitors themselves, as I adjust, it will have a direct impact. So this way, this is kind of independent of the gain changes made in the control room. So again, go to the main area and put the SuperVision in the insert slots at the bottom there. All right, so we see Recyclop is joining late from Finland. Says he was enjoying his son's premiere playing drums on the theater show. Congratulations. I hope he had a great time doing it. All right, so we see Lovin-ish Sharma. I'm struggling so much with Cubase 14 Pro and a Mac M4 Mini. I've done all the recommended changes, yet disk overloads and audio dropouts only happens on Cubase. Is it a problem others are facing with M4 and 14 Pro? So I would say not, but let me, if you could let us know, and if you want to send me a project, I'd be happy to open it up to see how it's working here. See if there's plugins that make sure Cubase will default to run in Apple Silicon mode. But if you put 14 plugins on one track, that could overload the audio performance. So, but generally it's been very stable, and people are getting incredible performance out of it. All right, so you see Peter Bata just says he's referring to an issue with the iLock manager. So I think earlier versions of Vienna Ensemble Pro were e-licenser based, and then they had migrated when Steinberg had decided to move to move away from e-licenser to an account-based system. So you may have to, I would reach out to Vienna Ensemble. So if you still have an e-licenser license, that's not going to automatically be copied over to iLock, but they do have a new license management system that's not using. All right. So Jazz Dude was kind enough to translate. Says Greg, he's asking, he records audio on top several times and doesn't know why you can't hear the last take. How should he deal with the issue? So when we are doing this, you could always. It could be that the last take when you record was, so look at it and see if you have actual parts. So you may have like a little bit of an overlap, but to switch between the different recordings on top of each other, just come right over here and again just choose to switch, and then you could see and hear exactly what you're working with. All right, so with that, we are out of time. We'd like to go ahead and wrap up. And with that, I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. If you've learned something new, make sure that you do hit the like button. We'll be back on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And then next week, there will be no live streams because of the NAMM show. I want everyone to stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you back on Friday. Thank you.